make it that I had a hatred against blacks or racial.
The Recoil project really began as a sideline to my involvement with Depeche Mode. And initially, I would try to fit in wherever I could in downtime, anything I could do with Recoil. And the first release, in fact, was a 4-track cassette demo. We decided to release it inconspicuously as a mini album, just to throw it out there, see what would happen, without making too much of an issue out of it. I wasn't even sure, after I left Depeche Mode, whether I should continue with the Recoil project as it had been. But I thought that actually it had evolved quite interestingly, and it made more sense to really continue.
So Alan, the question that everybody wants to ask you, why did you leave Depeche Mode?
Well, the reason I left Depeche Mode, in a nutshell, is that I didn't want to be in a group anymore. I didn't feel the confines of a group suited me anymore. For me personally, I didn't feel there was anything that I could really achieve within that situation. I mean, it's not an easy decision to actually turn your back on a very successful group like that. I just feel these days I'm much happier being my own boss and doing my own things. The advantages of having a project like this is that it's very open and it's ever changing and evolving. And because I tend to bring people into it at the appropriate time, it can really be anything I want it to be at any time. I try to work instinctively, which means I try to react to what happens when I try an idea, rather than think too consciously about something I'm trying to get.
Pick me up, amuse me.
Putting something together with perhaps a bass line or a rhythm part and a string part or something, to at least get a basis of some kind of atmosphere. And from that point onwards, I try to think of a theme or concept that will at least give a focus to what I'm doing.
Carla was on her break from the graveyard shift at the mayonnaise factory.
With the previous Recoil album, there were 3 vocalists involved: Moby, Tony Halliday and Doug McCarthy. But on that album, they were really brought in to add sort of vocal textures to what was essentially an instrumental record. Whereas this time round, it was clear as I was working that just about every track required a vocal of some description, and it needed more than just the texture of voices. It needed songs and lyrics and the rest of it.
Think of Jack as a luscious apparatus in a meat suit.
There's 4 different solo vocalists on this album. How did you come across them?
I'd met Douglas when he was a member of Nights Are Ebb, and they supported Depeche Mode back in '88, I think it was. Hildia Campbell, who is a black gospel singer who had worked with Depeche on the last album and tour, so I knew her. And then 2 people I didn't know, Maggie Estep, who's a New York spoken word artist, and Siobhan Lynch, who's a sort of young, unknown singer.
Let it slide, let it slide. Ignore me and everything I've done.
Well, Alan sent me a DAT tape of a couple of songs from the album as he saw they should be arranged, and obviously without the lyrics, and I recorded the lyrics onto the very DAT tapes that he sent me, and I sent them back to him, and a few weeks later I went down to his little studio, and we basically put the vocals onto the songs, and it was really very, very simple.
It seems to me a pretty amazing way to work for a vocalist. I mean, I don't know how you feel about this.
Well, you know, people write songs over the internet now, and people, you know, writing in correspondence isn't that unusual anymore. It seems odd, it seems very far from the artistic process, but it actually makes a lot of sense because you're going into it blind, you have no preconceptions about the other person, you know, and all you've got there in front of you is the music.
What was it about the music that you were sent that kind of said, yeah, I want to be part of this?
I like grooves and I like atmosphere, and it had a lot of that, and it also had something quite unique to it, and a kind of restrained energy that I found very attractive.
The reason I got particular people involved because I wanted their contribution and their talents, and I don't feel that writing lyrics is really my strong point, and it seems silly for me to try to draw something from myself that doesn't really come naturally. My forte, if you like, is putting together all the other elements and incorporating what they do within the music. And so I made it very clear when I got involved with these different singers that they could have this free rein, but that I am liable to take what they do and maybe restructure it.
It's interesting to come in on a project that has its basis set in stone, quite literally. It wasn't a case of me going in and saying to Al, well, I've got this great chorus, but you're going to have to change all this around. This is what I was presented with, and so the confines of that actually create some sort of excitement. With Incubus, the idea was of a sense of paranoia, a sense that someone is after me. And there were the Martin Sheen samples already on the track. So I built up around those, and Apocalypse Now is one of my favourite movies, but more than that, the Heart Darkness, the making of Apocalypse Now, I find actually more impressive. And so I used the paranoia that is more evident in the making of the movie than actually in the movie itself.
There were too many of me.
And what we actually did when we got into the studio, I do a pretty good impersonation of Mr. Sheen, so not the spray, not the polish, Mr. Sheen, the actor. So I actually did the whole take. It wasn't even a sample.
You know my name. My name is Death.
What is ultimately the big thing about your music, or the thing that comes through most importantly for you about your music?
For me, with everything I do, and it's quite obvious, once it's finished, it seems to always have a dark, strong atmosphere to it. As to why those things constantly reappear, I couldn't really say. It's not that I've had some great personal tragedies happen to me necessarily that I need to withdraw on. I think it's more observational, really. I think I've seen quite a lot of sort of things happen to other people around me in my life, in all areas. And I think I tend to draw on those things. People say I have a trademark sound, actually, and I suppose it's a combination of, firstly, your choice of particular sounds that you want to combine, and then the way, once you have those sounds, you then structure them. It's not as clear-cut as someone having a particular guitar technique.
What are your main musical influences? Who do you listen to?
I find myself always drawn in record stores to the soundtrack department, and I've got a lot of soundtrack albums, and I don't know, I often find that the mixture of music you get on a soundtrack album can be far more interesting than on a pop record. Most pop records these days, you get past tracks 1 and 2 and it's all downhill from there on. The soundtrack area is a very interesting one, and I think there's a lot of that in the music I'm already doing, although obviously it's not done specifically for a film. Perhaps in a similar way that Barry Adamson does, I'm almost making music that could be applied to a film.
Did you have Unsound Methods as the title for the album before you started, or was that kind of something that once you gathered your songs together you thought, oh yeah?
The title Unsound Methods came late in the day, actually, and it just seemed an apt phrase to describe a lot of the subjects. It seemed applicable to quite a few things on the record. Having looked at what I've ended up with, it seems that there is a link and a correlation between a lot of the subjects, and most of them seem to deal with personality disorders of some description.
Where do you think that Recoil sits then in the musical scene today? Do you care? Does it matter?
Well, I think I'd be lying if I said that I didn't want the project to be received well, particularly by people you respect. The pressure's less than it used to be with Depeche, where there was a great expectation on everything he did, particularly as time went on. So it's, in a way, it's a relief. It's me just being able to do exactly what I want to do.